and then see if we agree, because he turns the keys, is what he says, either to one side or the other. I'd like to see if we agree with what he's saying about those keys.
There's a lot of hoopla about age these days.
But not for me.
See that guy in the red shirt? That's Allan Lichtman, 77-year-old Allan Lichtman. And he's racing in the qualifiers for the Senior Olympics. But there's another kind of race Allan's just as qualified for.
Allan Lichtman.
Allan Lichtman.
Professor Allan Lichtman, who has correctly predicted almost every presidential election since 1984.
And today, Allan Lichtman's ready to tell us who's going to win in 2024. You see, you may think Allan's just a jock.
Well, I was a steeplechase champion in the 1970s.
His name is Dr. Allan Lichtman.
But he's actually kind of a nerd, a history professor, and a quiz show champion. These days, he's on a different kind of winning streak. To make his presidential predictions, Allan's model ignores the polls and the pundits.
It hinges on 13 keys that I developed in 1981 with my geophysicist friend, Vladimir Kailas-Borak. It's based on 120 years of presidential election outcomes before then.
Told you, he's a nerd. Allan's model was one of the few that called it for Trump in 2016.
Donald Trump is going to win.
And in 2020, Allan got it right again.
Trump will lose the White House.
The race was tight, but the keys were right.
So let's get to how these keys actually work.
They are 13 big picture, true, false questions that tap into the strength and performance of the White House.
Okay, so let's break down these true or false questions and see if we agree or disagree with his policies on them. By the way, Cat Joy, Amy Heights, and then a triple whammy from Cat Joy. Thank you guys for helping getting this super sticker train rocking and rolling.
House party, and only 2 keys have anything to do with the candidates.
But Allan, 2024 is an unprecedented election year. Can your 13 keys really call it right?
The keys absolutely will work. They are the constant northern star of political prediction.
All right, time to run these keys and find out who will be the next president of the United States, according to Allan.
But first, let me change into something a little more comfortable.
Number 1, the White House party gained House seats between midterm elections.
The Democrats did better than expected in 2022, but they still lost House seats, so the key is false.
Remember, a false key is good for Trump. Number 2, the incumbency key. The sitting president is running for re-election.
Biden withdrew from the race, costing the Democrats this key. It is false.
Wait, you're saying it would have helped the Democrats if Biden stayed in?
If Biden stayed in, they would have salvaged this one key. That's all.
Okay. Moving on for now. Number 3, the White House party avoided a primary contest.
The Democrats finally got smart and united overwhelmingly behind Vice President Harris. So the key is true.
So Kamala Harris gets a point because she stole the nomination for presidency? Yeah, that sounds about right.
True key. That moves Harris off the starting block. Number 4, there's no third-party challenger.
RFK Jr. has dropped out of the race, and no other third-party candidate is anywhere close to the 10% polling threshold needed to turn this key. It's true.
4 keys in, and it's neck and neck. Let's keep going. Number 5,
the thing about that third party one that's so unique is that he may have to revise that key if Trump ends up winning, because that key actually, let's just say RFK was taking points mainly from Kamala Harris because he was a Democrat and he endorsed Donald Trump. And so that push from RFK might actually be a key for Donald Trump. And he may have to revise. It's unprecedented. That kind of thing has never happened. It'd be like if Ross Perot had withdrawn from the race in 92 and endorsed George Bush. I think George Bush would have won and not Bill Clinton, because I think, I think Ross Perot is the reason why George H.W. Bush didn't win re-election. So that key would just say might go to Donald Trump.
Short-term economy is strong.
Look, despite all the loose talk about a so-called vibe session, the economy is not in recession, so this key is true.
Number 6.
The only reason I think we're not in recession is because they just haven't declared that we're in recession. They've been definitely doing whatever they could to make sure we don't have a recession, but we saw the stock market tumble the most it's ever tumbled in one day, and we've talked about the short-term economy, and to me, again, that's one of those keys where it's like maybe technically, if that's your pure definition of it, are we in recession or not? That could go to Kamala. However, that one's again right on the edge, sort of like the third party thing. We've been teetering on a recession for so long.
Long-term economic growth during this presidential term has been at least as good as the last 2 terms.
Growth during the Biden term is far ahead of growth during the previous 2 terms, so this key is clearly true.
Number 7. The White House has made major changes to national policy.
Rejoining the Paris Accords on climate change, the CHIPS bill, the infrastructure bill, the Inflation Reduction and Climate Change bill. Clearly, the key is true.
There has been a ton of policy passed by Joe Biden. I think a lot of it fell under the radar because there was that recovery from COVID, and so Americans weren't really paying attention. And so there has been a lot of policy change. There's no doubt about that one.
Number 8. There is no sustained social unrest during the term.
There have been sporadic protests, but nothing approaching the massive, sustained social unrest needed to turn this key. So it's true.
But schools are
That I was about to say what probably they're saying. University campuses are so upset. In particular, it feels like pro-Palestine, that they're doing these encampments again or camping out again, that before the election, that social unrest may happen. And so we need to be keeping an eye on that because that key could go to Donald Trump. I agree that right now, today, there's not social unrest, but I can feel the rumblings of it. I feel like we're really close to that social unrest.
are just going back to session. With new protests, couldn't this key flip?
Yes, there are a lot of protesters upset with Biden's policies in the Middle East.
Right.
But now with Harris, not Biden, front and center, that has dampened
That's true.
social unrest.
That's true. It feels like the policies that Harris has, which is obviously a lot more sympathetic to Palestine than Joe Biden is, it has dampened that social unrest. However, she's been moving more towards the center on what she's been saying publicly about Israel. I think more to gain voters than out of her own belief. But still, again, that social unrest key could go to Donald Trump. But I do agree that currently it's going to Kamala Harris.
Number 9. The White House is untainted by scandal.
Oh, my favorite key, the scandal key. And Republicans have been trying for years to pin a scandal on President Biden and come up empty. So the key is true.
Again, that's a gray area key. Some people consider it a scandal that Joe Biden's brain doesn't work and that Kamala Harris covered it up. Some people consider it a scandal that there was a coup that ousted him from being the candidate for his party, and Kamala Harris is the nominated person running without ever having received a vote. So it would just depend on what the deep definitions of our scandal. But from my perspective, that's a key that I could very easily articulate and create an argument for belongs to Donald Trump.
But come on, Allan. Biden's horrific debate performance, questions about his age, Hunter Biden
pleaded guilty today to how many tax fraud charges and was convicted as a felon in another court case he had.
Doesn't any of that count?
No, there has to be at least some bipartisan recognition of actual corruption that implicates the president himself.
Okay, RFK was a Democrat who said that they're using lawfare against political candidates of the Democratic Party. Again, I would consider that one a gray one. That could be a key for Donald Trump.
Not a family member. So the key remains true.
So 2 false and 7 true so far. Looking pretty good for the Democrats. We have 4 keys left, all of which would have to be false for Trump to have a path. Number 10, the incumbent party candidate is charismatic.
She has no charisma. I hate to say it. I hate to say it. Michelle Obama has charisma. Barack Obama has charisma. Bill Clinton in his heyday, charisma. Kamala Harris, she ain't got nothing.
This is a very high threshold key. You have to be a once-in-a-generational, broadly inspirational candidate. Harris has not met that standard, so this key is false.
She won't even do an interview by herself. She has no charisma.
Number 11, the challenger is uncharismatic.
Some people think Donald Trump is a god, but he only appeals to a narrow base, so that key is true.
But wait, that means...
The Democrats will hold on to the White House, and Kamala Harris will be the next president of the United States.
But wait a sec, Allan. We still have 2 keys left. The foreign policy keys?
You're right. Foreign policy is tricky, and these keys could flip. The Biden administration is deeply invested in the war in Gaza, which is a humanitarian disaster with no end in sight. But even if both foreign policy keys flipped false, that would mean that there were only 5 negative keys, which would not be enough for Donald Trump to regain the White House.
So I guess that means you're standing by your prediction.
Kamala Harris will be the next president of the United States. At least that's my prediction for this race. But the outcome is up to you. So get out and vote.
So it's interesting, his perspective, in my opinion, has been accurate. And I feel like my commentary on it was extremely fair. It depends on the deep definitions of each of those terms. I still think Donald Trump's going to win. Let's look at the real clear averages today. If you just look at this, again, it's, Donald Trump's leading in more states than Harris. There's a lot of these states that are major battlegrounds. New Hampshire's turned into a battleground state. Donald Trump, I think, is going to take Georgia. I think he's going to take North Carolina. Let me just actually turn it into create my own map, and I'll tell you what I think is going to happen. I think he's going to take that state, and I think he's going to take Nevada, and I think it might be 287 to 251. Now, if you ask Amy Heights, she's pretty confident he's going to take Michigan, which would make it 302 to 236. If you hear the rumors of what's happening with Kamala Harris's internal polling, she's losing in her own polling right now in New Hampshire, which is extremely important. So it could end up being 306 to 232. That's what I think is likely going to happen, just from my own perspective. I don't see a future of him losing Georgia after him and Brian Kemp actually came together. He's winning, I think, pretty significantly in Pennsylvania. I think a lot of Pennsylvanians are upset that she didn't choose Josh Shapiro, which is their governor, to be her running mate. So again, that man is obviously making some choices and decisions based on what he's saying and what he thinks. But from my perspective, I think Trump's in the lead. I think if the election was today, he would win. I think after the debate next week, he's definitely going to take the win. So from my perspective,